The Racecourse is one of the most populated parks in Northampton, but not many people know its history or what purpose it serves.
Hi, my name's Ian Bates. I'm a volunteer at the Umbrella Fair. I've been here since the Umbrella Fair started 11 years ago and been part of watching it grow and develop very slowly over that period of time. The park as we know it now, the racecourse, has evolved over the last 200 years. So originally it was used for grazing of cattle and sheep. It was a common land. It still actually is designated as common land, and so it's great that it's still openly used by local people, the common people. Its then kind of next use was actually as a racecourse, so it was where horses used to race, so they'd run around the racecourse. If you don't know anything about horse racing, the horse racing circuit tends to be a fairly large area. And although the racecourse looks big, in terms of horse racing, it was a very short, small course. So although there was horse racing here for a number of years, decades, it did come to an end simply because it was too short a course and it was a bit dangerous.
There was a lot of parts of the racecourse. One of the problems with the racecourse, which eventually stopped the racing, was the fact that there were so many paths across the racecourse which people used to get from the town as it was to Kingsthorpe and to other areas of the town. And in fact, one of the problems was that a gentleman was actually killed in 1902 trying to rescue his child from a race that was taking place, and he was run over by the actual horses themselves, and he was run over and killed. As a result of that, there was a number of similar sort of incidents, and the Jockey Club in 1904 rescinded the racing licence of Northampton Racecourse.
And that was, I think, when the Borough Council designated it as a local park, so it's one of Northampton's premier parks now. It's the Sports and Recreation Premier Park of Northampton. There is so much sport played on here. And that's the other thing about the history of the park. Sport has been played here for over 100 years. If you speak to most local Northampton young men, they'll probably tell you about playing football up on the racecourse at some time or other, either for a team or just with their friends. Cricket has been played on the racecourse, so there is historical evidence that W.G. Grace, who's probably the most famous of all cricketers in the world, W.G. Grace did actually play on the racecourse. I suppose that's our cricketing claim to fame. But I know as a young lad I played cricket on the racecourse and played against some players who went on to play for Northamptonshire County Cricket Club and then go on to play for other county cricket clubs. So it's been the start of a number of professional cricketers' careers and also footballing careers. Again, I played against 3 players who I know for sure went on to play for Northampton Town and other football clubs. So its sporting heritage is long and fairly notorious and famous.
Although the buildings used to be more significant in the past, they still serve a purpose today.
The jewel in the racecourse's crown, in my view, is the beautiful Grade 2 listed pavilion building. It was the grandstand for the horse racing. We're sitting in the pavilion now, and this is where the jockeys would have come to be weighed in and where they would put their silks on, where the owners of the horses would enjoy a meal and perhaps a glass of wine before the race and maybe a bottle of champagne after, depending on how the horses did. And there are photographs of the racecourse pavilion, the grandstand, with tiering on the roof, people on the balcony, and hundreds, thousands of people out the front. So it was when racing on the big race days in Northampton, huge parts of Northampton's community would have come and watched the racing here and used the facilities at the pavilion. So after the horse racing stopped and sport sort of took more of a hold on the racecourse, the pavilion was then converted into changing rooms on the ground floor, and upstairs there was a restaurant, was here for many years, and also upstairs was also used for bands. If you actually ask a number of people in Northampton now who are sort of my age, they'll remember punk bands being, so there's some pretty famous punk bands from way back, and also rock bands who have performed here at the Pavilion, which is interesting because the Umbrella Fair itself, that's where we're hoping to take the Pavilion. So during using volunteers only, we're refurbishing the building, and we've already had a number of local bands play here, but as we develop the building and the facilities here as a music and arts community centre, we'll be bringing back music more and more and more to the Pavilion, and of course good food. So we're really into healthy eating, so sustainable lifestyle. So we're really looking forward to developing a cafe and then a restaurant, and a really interesting offer for local people.
Well, the big Pavilion building is quite interesting in itself, purely and simply because it is common land. In about 1840, it was decided that some sort of grandstand pavilion should be erected on the racecourse. Now, because it is common land, it is illegal to put a permanent structure on the racecourse, and it is very difficult to actually find any written record of who actually constructed the pavilion. It was done on the nod and the wink of the freemen. There was a company which issued shares for the building of the pavilion, but there is no clear permissions or anything else to actually allow them to do. It was done on a nod and a wink with the freemen, because remember, the freemen were essentially today's councillors, and so they fixed it up amongst themselves. Various grandstands were built, but most of them were temporary structures. There was only about 3 that were actually permanent structures, and one of which was actually taken down when racing finished and went to Uttoxeter Racecourse, and was only demolished in 1970, I believe. The pub on the corner is called the White Elephant. It was originally built as a public club for the jockeys and owners and officials of the racing. Now, you've got to understand that it was built for that purpose. Now, problem being that there was only 6 days racing in the year. It became an odd building right on the corner, and it was eventually called the Kingsley Park Hotel because they couldn't make the club work. And it was then that the houses then began to be built in the Kingsley area, and so it became a public house essentially, and it was bought by Pickering Phipps, the brewer in Northampton, who actually built St Matthew's Church, which is just over the road from where we're sitting now.
The racecourse history isn't all horses and sports. It also has a dark side.
I became aware that there was a gallows not 150 yards away from the house. And so therefore that started to my interest in racecourse history. A gallows ground is actually shown on the 1782 map of the racecourse, and it shows a little tiny area which says gallows ground, and that's where the gallows was. It was actually designated through the fact that the various executions prior to 1715 had taken place around where now today it is Abington Avenue and the county ground. That's approximately where the executions took place. Although there was one gentleman who was burned at the stake for heresy in the reign of Queen Mary, and he was the priest, Cyrisham. At the gallows ground itself, the first execution took place in 1715. She was a lady called Elizabeth Tressler, who was actually burned at the stake August the 6th, 1715. She was burned at the stake for murdering her husband with the milk of mercury. From then onwards, it became the place of execution for Northampton, The interesting point is that it's actually on the road to and from Kettering. Like all of the gallows and other places where bodies were hung after they were executed, it was actually to say, we actually abide by the law, so don't mess about. It was a demonstration of civic power by the assize. Various people were executed on the racecourse. Probably the most famous is in 1787, 6 people were executed, 4 members of which were the members of the Culworth gang. They had been variously arrested and tried at the assize for committing robbery across the western side of the county, and the Culworth gang is notorious at that time. One of the gentlemen was actually hung for stealing a flitch of bacon and 2 guineas. Various executions took place not on a yearly basis, sometimes it was 2 or 3 years between executions. They were brought from the town jail, which was in Angel Lane, which is now the county hall, or shortly to be changed. But the jail was underneath the county hall, and they were brought up in a cart and then stood underneath the gallows, and the cart was taken away. The last executions took place in 1819, and the reason why it's the last executions was at the time, in 1819, the Peterloo Massacre took place in Manchester, and civic dignitaries decided that because there was no police force in those days, you only had what was known as the militia. There was a quite considerable worry about public order and the gathering of lots and lots of people. And so therefore it was decided that the 1819 executions were the last ones that took place.
Did you know the racecourse had a very important role with helping our soldiers during the World Wars?
The racecourse has been known for all sorts of events. Obviously there's the horse racing that used to go on. But back in the day, the park was actually used during the war, both in the First and Second World War, for a thing called billeting, which is where soldiers, they need somewhere to stay before they actually go and fight the wars, which obviously was overseas, and they stayed here for a period before they actually left to go to fight the wars across in Europe. The other thing that the racecourse was used for during the war was growing vegetables. There was never enough vegetables around, and so quite a lot of fruit and vegetables was grown on the racecourse. You wouldn't know it now because it's obviously a beautiful park where there's lots of sports played, but during the war it was actually used for that.
The racecourse serves as a catalyst even till today. It's still as relevant as it was back in the horse racing days.
So all the umbrella fair activities are based around the racecourse park, so they're either on the park or involving the local communities. And when I say communities, I mean all the different types of community. That's people who are younger, older, people who are historically from England and from Northampton, people who have joined Northampton's community from Eastern Europe or from Africa. Wherever they've come from, we want to engage with all those people. So if they live around the racecourse or use the racecourse, we kind of want to get involved with them. And what we look to do is develop a sense of community cooperation, people getting together to do stuff, which is what we do. And we also want people to think about the environment and the environmental impact that they have on the environment, and how they can have a more sustainable lifestyle.
The racecourse is used to organise events and festivals because of its size and social value.
So the main event that happens on the racecourse is a large music, community, arts festival, which is put on by the Umbrella Fair, all done by volunteers. There are 422 volunteers last year were part of the volunteering team, and just as many performers. So that's a pretty powerful thing, 800, 900 people, local people getting together to put on something for the community. And that's a really nice thing. We started the festival, or we then came to the racecourse after the Balloon Festival had finished, which was a really lovely sight to see. I remember it as fairly a young person coming up here and watching all the balloons go up, and it was a terrific event with local people just coming and sharing the balloons going up in the morning or in the evening and watching the balloon glow. It was a really cool thing to actually watch and see. That then became quite commercial, and after being here about 10 years or so, it actually moved and left. It's gone somewhere else now, which gave us a space to bring back a more community-focused event, which we're very proud of.
With the track record that the racecourse had, it looks as if it will continue to benefit Northampton within the near and far future.